Alright, welcome back everyone. Following up from the short lesson last time, we'll now be expanding on that stock control general concepts foundation and getting into some BPOS specific stock control components in this lesson. This will be a bit on the longer side, so I'll warn you now, but we will just get right into it. There is a little overview here of what we will be going through though. We will start with a look at setting up suppliers in BPOS, along with some purchasing and supplier related product settings. Now some of that will be a bit of a review, but some are things that we've only skimmed through in the past and we'll take a bit of a deeper look at today. Anyway, after that we'll get into an introduction of our purchasing and receiving, and we'll run through a brief workflow there. And then we will finish with a look at stock takes and BPOS, along with workflow and options, the various options that we have for those. Okay, so in the last lesson I mentioned how important it is to have suppliers set up in the system, so let's run through that process in back office. First off, the supplier list can be found within the maintenance menu. I believe it is the only maintenance menu component that we haven't looked at yet. But if I open the supplier list, it's obviously not going to be any here yet in this database. I won't go through all the options in this window for adding and editing suppliers. We don't need to go over how to structure and use the supplier list itself. All the principles and everything that we've gone over in the past for other lists in back office apply to suppliers also. So just feel free to configure your supplier list however you'd like. Our main focus is going to be the actual supplier settings, so I'll just go ahead and add a new one. I won't really structure my supplier list in any particular way. But yeah, with a new supplier maintenance window open here, you can see that there is a bit going on, but it can really be broken down into two main parts. Firstly, that we can maintain and store some information about the supplier on file. So some general things here as far as their contact information and etc. And then we have a handful of flags down here in the bottom right that are pertaining to each supplier. Some of which we will get into a little bit now, but some we will cover in other lessons in later on in the course. So we will just start from the top and then we will skim through just sort of highlighting some of the most important things, some of which we will reference again later. But first things first is going to be the supplier name. Now this will be for some internal reference, but it will also appear on printed purchase orders and elsewhere throughout the system. Let's just call this one, I'll call it A+ beverages. There we go. Now next to that is going to be our supplier number. Now this only needs to be used if we are exporting to an external integrated accounting system, which we will not be getting into in this course, but I did want to mention the supplier number today because it's important to know the difference between the supplier number and the supplier ID, which is actually nowhere on this form, but similar to other database records that we've talked about in the past, the ID for a record is automatically assigned by the system when the record is created. That is then going to be used throughout the system to identify the supplier, firstly wherever the name is not used, but also instances where the supplier's name might change. The ID will never change so that we can always use it to reference the supplier in the future. So if let's say A+ beverages gets sold here and they change the name to ABC beverages, the supplier ID that's attached to the record will always remain regardless if the supplier name changes or if the supplier number changes. Anyway, moving on to some self-explanatory things here. We have our date created and our last receipt, which was the last time that we received an order for the supplier. Obviously, it's never for this one, and the date created was the exact minute that this supplier record was created, which was just a couple minutes ago. We do have an inactive flag next to those. Now, we have talked many times already in this course about the reasoning behind only being able to make records inactive, and to put the supplier spin on why it would be necessary to prevent supplier records from being deleted. There will be other records like purchase orders, manual receipts, so on and so forth, that will link back to the supplier that will always exist and we'll always need to have the supplier record for reference and have that link between, let's say, a purchase order and a supplier, even if the supplier is no longer used by the venue anymore or by the store. So we do need to always keep supplier records in the system, even if we do make them inactive. Okay, moving down, we do have the option for a linked file. So we've looked at these before too. We can optionally link an external file to a supplier record, maybe a supplier contract or something like that. Then we do have all of the pertinent contact details that we might need to keep readily available. Nothing out of the ordinary here really, except for fax. I don't think anyone uses those anymore, but we still have that field there. Moving down, we have a comment box. Now this is just an open text field, so we can write any notes or comments about a supplier that we want to keep with their record. Maybe some notes about who the best person to contact is or something like that. Then below that, we have our default delivery. Now each purchase order can include some delivery notes with it. They might be notes about that specific delivery or some instructions for the delivery driver or something like that. What we enter here can be used for default notes that will appear on every purchase order for the supplier, but those can be changed per purchase order. But anything that we enter here on the supplier record will show by default, and then we can edit that on a per purchase order basis if we need to. Then as we move over to the right side of the supplier maintenance form, we've got some purchase order and other invoice configurations here that can be set, which we will not get into today because they're for a bit more of a deeper dive in a future lesson. By the way, we can also maintain custom info for suppliers, but we won't get into that today either. The same principles that we've seen in previous lessons regarding adding and editing custom fields and then maintaining them for a database record, those also apply to suppliers. We do have a number of flags here that are related to purchase orders, which we will be looking at today. There's one in particular that I want to point out for now is going to be prompt for existing PO and receipt. You'll see when we go to add purchase orders later that there will be a few different options for how we can go about starting a purchase order. One of those is going to be to prompt for an existing purchase order if this flag is turned on. If this flag is turned off, which I will leave off for A+ beverages here, we'll see what the other option will be when we go to create our purchase orders later. But yeah, one of the main takeaways about suppliers for now is really just that we need to have them created so that we can purchase products from them, so that product quantities in the system can be updated and be maintained accurately. And the secondary, I guess, takeaway is that we can save a bunch of information and settings for each one, whether they be simple contact details or some configurations related to invoicing and purchase orders and so forth. Now, the other main takeaway, which we haven't got to yet, is that to make things a bit easier for us when we are creating purchase orders, we do have the ability to link products to a supplier, which we can do either from a product record, which we'll see in a little bit, or from a supplier record using this view/add products button. Now, I'm pretty sure I have mentioned this functionality in the past at some point, but we can use this to keep track of products that are supplied by this supplier and then be able to easily add or remove supplier products from this list, and then make things easier for us when we get to creating a purchase order. So maintaining this list for each supplier makes creating purchase orders a more streamlined process, which you'll see in a little bit, rather than searching through the entire product list. I know we don't have a ton of products in this database. I think we've got I won't be able to see all of them here because this is showing what is currently linked to our supplier, which at this point is none. But yeah, there's only, I think, a couple hundred products in this database at most, so not a huge product list, but in databases that may have hundreds or potentially thousands of products, this will streamline the process by, when we're creating purchase orders, narrowing the list down to only products that supplier does offer. So I will actually need to exit this, and I'll need to save the supplier record first, but then we can go back in and we can add some supplier products from here. If we just go to add supplier product, we will then have a product list here that we can search through, scroll through, do a product search here, and we can add products that will be linked to this particular supplier. So what I might do is just go to draft beer and cider, go select product group, and we can see that those have been added. Now initially they will be in this green color. That's because they've just been added. If I exit that list to save that and we go back in, they will be, or some of them will be, black now. However, this one product that is still green is green because that actually does not belong to any stores. If we open that up, we can see that there. But anyway, I'll go ahead and add some other products to this supplier. We go back to add supplier product, and we can select the next group down maybe, and I'll add these non-alcoholic beverages for this supplier as well. Now what I might do is I'll pause the recording, I'll add a couple of other suppliers to this database, I'll link some products to all of them, and then I will be back in a second. I'll show you what I did, and then we will move on to some purchasing related supplier settings. Alright, so I have added a few other suppliers here. For our A+ beverages, we can see if we go to base product group, I'll just turn on sub products, that we've got 66 products added total here for them. Just all of the stocked beverages in this database. Then for the next supplier, Get This Bread Bakery, just all of our bakery items have been added here for them. For Pete's Provisions, we've got quite a bit that were added here for these guys, or 33 products, not a ton, but again, there's not a ton of products in this database, but we've got a variety of things added for this supplier, everything from dairy to different dry goods, some produce, starches, and so forth. And then for Surf and Turf, our butcher and seafood provider, you've got the different protein and seafood options that we have in our database here. Again, not a ton. But one thing I do want to mention is that we're not limited to only adding products to one supplier. If there are products that we can purchase from multiple suppliers, we can add a product to multiple suppliers. I haven't done that here in this database just to keep things a bit more streamlined and simple for us, but I did want to mention that we can add a supplier link to multiple supplier links to the same product if we need to. Cool, I'll just close these, but now that we've got these suppliers added, we can progress towards creating purchase orders so that we can purchase products from these suppliers. However, as we segue into placing purchase orders themselves, we should first go through some of the product settings that relate to purchasing. So I'll just open any of these stock products here. A BPOS Pale Ale seems to be the go-to product that I select. But yeah, firstly, I'll just point out that in order to receive stock accurately for a product, the product itself does need to be set up correctly. Now, that starts with the stock mode, which needs to be selected from this drop-down. And in this case, we've got this set to stocked, meaning that, and this is going to be a little bit of a review from earlier sessions when we looked at product settings, but that's going to mean that this is a stocked product that can be purchased from suppliers. Which does remind me that we should again touch on the difference between stocked products and non-stocked products and briefly go through these other stock modes, and I have a little slide prepared to go through those. Now as we go through this, just keep in mind that this is only a Stock Control 101 lesson, so we won't get into a super amount of detail with these. But yeah, I think we all know what a stocked product is versus non-stocked. Stocked are any products that we're going to be purchasing from suppliers and selling to customers. Some examples on the slide here, whereas non-stocked mode is used for things like cocktails or menu items that are not purchased from suppliers but are made of stocked product ingredients. So they're added to the product list to be sold. Their stock can never be counted because they don't technically have any stock. They don't really exist until they're sold, and then they're gone straight away, but their ingredient stock is used for them. Their ingredient stock is going to be decremented from the system. Which brings up a good point for a reminder that for non-stock products, it is strongly advised to configure their ingredient products accurately for their quantity on hand figures to be maintained correctly in the system as the non-stock products themselves are being sold. Now, in contrast to that, we do have a product mode, or a stock mode I should say, called non-stock purchase only. Now this is a newer stock mode as of version 4.7, so if you're on an older version of the software, you won't see this stock mode. But this stock mode is meant to be used for intangible purchases, so things like utilities, airfare, etc. So not only are they non-stocked products, and they're not even really products, but they are intangible things that cannot be sold or really have anything done with them in the system other than track and report on their purchases. They are purchase only. Then we have manufactured products. So we are going to get more into these over the next couple of lessons, and in fact we will have a lesson dedicated to them coming up. Not the next lesson, but the following lesson will be all about manufactured products. But just to summarize, these are products that have to be manufactured before they can be sold. They are also made from ingredient products. So similar to non-stocked, however, they are quite different from non-stocked products. At the point that manufactured products are processed in the system, so at the point that they are manufactured, stock is deducted from their ingredient products, and stock is created for the manufactured product, which then makes it stockable and can be counted for stock purposes and can be sold and so forth. Then we have a stock mode called auto-manufactured. So this stock mode is used for cases where there may be insufficient or no quantity on hand to manufacture a base manufactured product. So this comes in handy for what are sometimes referred to as nested manufactured products, wherein one manufactured product is an ingredient of another manufactured product. But like I said, we will get much more into these two stock modes in an upcoming lesson. And then also new as of version 4.7 are consumables. So this is the stock mode which we would want to use for tangible items that are used throughout day-to-day operations within the store, within the venue and stores internally, but that are not ever going to be sold to consumers. So some examples on the screen here of what those could be, but yeah, essentially they're products that we are going to purchase and use in-house, but will never be sold to customers, will never be an ingredient product of something that something that is sold to customers either. We simply want to be able to purchase these products and then track and report on their purchases and on their usage internally. But yeah, we'll head back to our product settings, just a quick summary of our different stock modes there. And to sort of wrap up on the stock modes there, so to be able to purchase products from suppliers, they do need to be either stocked, non-stocked, stocked, non-stock purchase only, or consumables. So those three stock modes, if they're set for, will need to be set for a product to be able to be purchased, stocked, non-stock purchase only, or consumables. But for today, we will only be focusing on and dealing with stock products. So other than the stock mode that's been set here, we do then need to consider how a product is purchased in terms of units and how it's going to be sold or used internally relating to those units. So that starts on this tab with our base size and our reordering setups down here. I believe we've briefly gone over these settings in the past, but it certainly can't hurt to revisit them again. So the unit for reordering is going to be equal to 1 of the base size, and that could be a simple instance where the base size is just one item, and then product is ordered from suppliers in cases of those single units. So this is not an example of that here. One example would be maybe packaged drinks, where the base size is 1 and it's purchased in cases of 12 or 24 or whichever. If I close this, I'll see if I can find an example of that. I should have a packaged beer that is similar to that. There we go. So here we've got the base size set to 1 and a single unit of 24 cases, or sorry, cases of 24 single units, I should say, in that instance. Now another example though where the base isn't 1, and this might be for a consumable product. Could be something like maybe parchment paper, where the base size might be 500 items, so 500 sheets per sleeve, with then 2 sleeves per case. We'll just need to be configured that way to keep the unit costs accurate and so forth, so that when we do track usage in the system, we'll be able to see the correct cost allocated there. But yeah, these settings are just going to be dependent on the product and how it's packaged and purchased from suppliers. But that should be accurate in the system, not only for costing purposes, but also so that when we're placing purchase orders, we are ordering the correct sizes and units. Alright, now another product setting that is very much related to purchasing and to suppliers is something that we saw from the supplier side just a few minutes ago, and that is the ability to see which supplier or suppliers, if there are multiple suppliers linked to a product, which ones are linked, and this will tell us where we can purchase this particular product from. Now, because we, like I said earlier, we linked all of our stocked packaged beverages to our A+ beverages supplier here, we'll be able to see that. Now this also includes the option to save a product code, which we'll see when we get to the purchase order in a bit. We could probably spend quite a bit of time, a few minutes at least, going through all the options here, but again, 101 lesson here, so just quickly, supplier codes are typically going to be used internally by the supplier, and we can maintain 1 or more per product per supplier using this maintain supplier codes button. And then if a supplier has multiple codes, we'll be able to use the edit mode to then select one from a drop down here. Relatively self-explanatory and pretty simple to work out, but if you do need some assistance, we do have written documentation and other videos in my BPOS that you can refer to. What I might do here is just quickly add one to this product so that you can see it when we create a purchase order in a few minutes. Alright, now moving on to some other purchasing related settings that we have not gone over yet, although they have been mentioned a couple times, is going to be over on the store/pricing settings tab, where we have the minimum, maximum, and restock quantities here. And we can also see the current quantity on hand of a product in whichever store is selected here, which in this case is going to be 0, since we have not actually purchased any product in this database yet. Now, the minimum and maximum quantities, these are sometimes referred to as par levels, depending on the region of the world that you live in. But basically, what's the lowest amount of product that we're comfortable with stocking, and what's the maximum that we are willing to hold at one time. Then the restock quantity is exactly that. So for this store, what quantity are we willing to restock in? Now that should relate directly to the base size. In fact, if we hover over that, it's going to give us a bit more info about that. Basically, we're stipulating the quantity of the base unit that we'll be willing to restock in this store, and it can only be restocked in that quantity. So, for example, for bottled beer, like what we've got here, we might, while we purchase this from suppliers in cases of 24, maybe we're willing to restock it in certain stores in the venue in 6-packs. So maybe not the bulk beverage store. Maybe we're only going to purchase cases from the supplier into the bulk beverage store. But then maybe when it comes to transferring product around internally or stocking directly to that store, we are only going to restock in 6-packs. So you'd be able to set that specifically for that store. Remember, these are store and pricing settings, so they can differ from store to store. Now, these settings also tie directly to some of the automated purchase order options that we have, but they can also be referenced when we're placing purchase orders manually, and we'll see that in just a little bit. Now, since these are, like I said, part of the product store settings, and each store that the product is sold in can have different stocking quantities set here, I can set these for this product. Maybe the minimum quantity for our BPOS lager bottles in the main restaurant is going to be 48, and maybe the maximum quantity would be 96. So we want at least 48 bottles of BPOS lager in the main restaurant, but we don't want to go over 96, and we can restock those in 6-packs. Then if I go to a different store, maybe if we go back to the bulk beverage store, I'll first be prompted to save the changes that I've made there. But we can see that there are no quantities set here. The restock quantity is going to be set to 1 by default. But yeah, we can see that we can set different stocking quantities in each store. So maybe one store we could say we want to have a minimum of 10 units and a maximum of 25. Maybe for certain products we can restock by 1 single unit, but then in another store for that same product we might have a minimum requirement of 12 and a max of 48, and that restocks in quantities of 6 or 24 or 48 or whatever the case may be, depending on the product and its pack sizes and so on and so forth. So I won't actually set these for this product or for the other products, but just letting you know that we can set them individually per product, per store, because they are on the store pricing settings tab. We just need to make sure to select the correct store first and then set them however we need to. I should mention also, if I just save this, if we go to our store change by range, which you might remember from a few lessons back, or maybe it was more than a few, but we can actually set these by in a bulk way. So by per product group, we just need to hit set here, and we can actually set these if we do want to set the same minimum and maximum quantities for every product in the group, or at least maybe close enough for maybe most of them, and then just a couple that we need to change from there. So we might go ahead and set all of these for, and again, these are, since this is a store change by range, we need to set the store here first. So we've got this set to bulk beverage store. We might say for every product, or at least these packaged beer products, we want at least 24. It probably would be more than that in the real world, but just to set a quick example here, and maybe at most we want to have 96, and we can go ahead and set those. Done. Close that. Go in and check the next product down for our bulk beverage store. We can see that those have been set there for us. Now we do have some automatic purchase order options that will automatically order products based on how these quantities are set. So let's say, for example, if the store's quantity on hand for these falls below a minimum, so if we've got this set here to 24 and the quantity on hand falls below that, maybe to just say 20, the system can automatically order more when we're placing that type of those types of purchase orders up to the maximum quantity. But again, even for completely manual, non-automated purchase orders, which we will see next, the minimum, maximum, and restock quantities can be referenced there when we're placing an order. We will also be able to see whatever quantity is on hand in the store when we're creating purchase orders, and then be able to use the minimum max quantities there to determine what we do need to order if we are creating a manual purchase order. Speaking of which, let's get into our purchasing options now. So we'll discuss all of these options in this lesson, but we will only demonstrate a basic blank purchase order today. However, the principles that we'll see today are used throughout each purchasing option, and we do have extensive documentation, both written and videos, going over the other automated purchasing options that we do have. But yeah, there are two main ways that we can purchase products: purchase orders and manual receipts. Now, purchase orders we've talked about already here, and there are a few different options for those. One is completely non-automated, and the rest have varying levels of automation. As a reminder, purchase orders are placed ahead of time with suppliers for some time, usually in the near future, typically for delivery to the venue, although placing a purchase order and then picking up product from a supplier could also work. But the reason that I mentioned that purchase orders are placed ahead of time for a future order is because, in contrast to purchasing product that way, we can also enter manual receipts into the system. Now, that is typically done after product has been purchased. So a typical scenario, or one type of scenario, would be, let's say we forgot to order something on the purchase order, and now rather than wait until the next delivery, we're just going to run out to the store, to the supermarket, maybe even directly to the supplier, and purchase that product without a purchase order. But that product does still need to be accounted for in the system, or else there will not be any record for it and it's going to be like it just appeared out of thin air. And when we go to conduct a stock take at the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever the case may be, there will be a positive variance. And it's not positive as in it's a good thing. It's going to be positive as in there will be some unexplained overage of that product or of its quantity when it's counted for the stock take, compared to the stock movements and the sales that have been recorded for it in the system. But anyway, just a brief look at our purchasing options there. Let's get back into back office again, and we will see the workflow for a blank manual purchase order. So the first thing we will need to do is go to our stock control menu. Now within this menu we have quite a few options, some of which we will see in the next internal stock movements lesson, but for now we are going to purchasing and receiving. So what that's opened for us here is called our purchase order list, and this is where we will be able to review and report on and look at any existing purchase orders that have been created previously, and also be able to start new purchase orders. Not just purchase orders, but also manual receipts. Now obviously none in this database yet, but this is essentially a report of purchases that have been started and then can all have different statuses. We can see PO status here, depending on whether they've been saved, sent to the supplier, received, etc. Now from the standard view here, we can see a lot of other important data along with the PO status too. This is also where we would come for creating manual receipts, and we can see the option for that at the top of the window here. One other quick note about the purchase order list before I demo how a purchase order is created. So along the left side here, we have our list of suppliers. Now, why is that? Well, we can highlight one if we would like to narrow down the purchase order list to only show purchase orders in this report here for a specific supplier. Again, because this is a report, we can filter the report to a certain supplier if we'd like to. Also, prior to beginning a new purchase order or manual receipt, we can highlight one from the list here that we would like to order from. But yeah, nothing too complicated about the purchase order list overall. Once we do have some purchases in the system, we will be able to filter and display by a period as well. By the way, actually, if I click show completed, we'll be able to see that if we had some completed, we'd be able to filter by a display period here. Now to place a new purchase order, we've got a button at the top to do exactly that. What I'm going to do first is go to all suppliers here. I'm not going to have one specifically highlighted. So if we go to start a new purchase order without a supplier highlighted from the list on the left, we will then be prompted to select one now. Now we can still select all suppliers from here. We won't get into a demo with that today. We will have some different options if that workflow is followed, where the system can then create separate purchase orders per supplier after we've added the products to our purchase order. But what we'll do today is I will just select a specific purchase or a specific supplier. I will go with A+ Beverages here. Now, once we've selected a supplier so that the system knows who we're ordering from, we will have a variety of options to proceed from here. Now, one thing that I mentioned when we were looking at the supplier maintenance record earlier is that we have that flag that we can set to be able to select an existing purchase order. Or if that flag is turned off, we will have this option here called Use Min Max. So because I have that flag turned off for the supplier, that's why we have this option here. If that flag were turned on for a supplier, we would not have the Use Min Max option, and we would have an option in this spot to be able to select an existing supplier or an existing purchase order from the database. But again, trying to keep things as simple as possible for now, because like I said, a lot of these, or all of the principles that we'll see when we are creating a blank manual purchase order for now will follow through to our other purchasing options. So we now have our new purchase order window open where we can get started with adding products, but one of the first things that we need to do is to make sure that we are ordering for the correct store. Because once we get started, this store drop down here is going to be locked. It's going to be grayed out. Once we add a product to a purchase order or manual receipt, we will not be able to change this. So we do need to make sure that the correct store is selected first. If the venue does have multiple stores, obviously we need to select the appropriate one. Otherwise, we will end up ordering product for the wrong location. Again, stores are the stocking locations, not venues. So we will go ahead and actually order for our bulk beverage storage location here. Now, as you can see, there are quite a few other options on this purchase order form. Most in this purchase order details section up here are a bit self-explanatory and are, simply open text fields, a lot of them, that we can enter some relevant corresponding info into. Now, outside of the purchasing or the purchase order details section though, we do have some important things to touch on as well. One of them being the stock apply date down here. But we should take a minute here to explain a stock concept slash stock system called first in, first out, also known as FIFO, which is very common. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with the FIFO stock system already. We may have mentioned it in the past in a previous lesson, but either way we'll cover it again. The basic principle of the FIFO method is that the first stock that is received is the first stock that's going to be sold, so oldest stock is always used first. Now that's important for both the physical products or goods themselves as well as for costing purposes, so that the costs of the oldest products are going to be used first. So if we think back to maybe the Coca-Cola example that we went through in the last lesson, if we think of maybe this week we purchased all of our Coca-Cola cans for $1 each, and then next week they are going to cost us maybe $1.25 each. Now as we sell those in real life, obviously we do want to use, we want to follow the FIFO method, so we want to sell the oldest products first, but from a costing perspective we also want to use the cost of the oldest products first. Now the other option aside from FIFO is going to be a stock system called average stock, which is exactly that. So rather than consider individual costs that have been that the product's been purchased for over a period of time, the system is going to take all of the cost of the stock that's currently in the database and have an average cost for those. Now we do have a setting for that. I believe we have gone over this in the past, but I will just show it real quickly. If we come to our venue settings, and I believe it's on the flags tab, here we go, where we can actually set the system to average stock. So by default, will be set to FIFO. Now if I go ahead and click that, we are going to get a pretty big warning here, pretty much telling us not to do this once any sales have occurred in the system or once any stock has been purchased or entered into the system. So I am going to go ahead and cancel that obviously, but just wanted to briefly explain the difference there between FIFO and average stock. And why this is applicable to the stock apply date here is that the stock apply date can be used if there are some times that maybe promotional pricing has been offered by a supplier and we would want that promotional cost to be used during the promotional period. So in that case, we can set the stock apply date so that the cost price of the products that we're purchasing now will apply rather than sticking to the FIFO system. So let's say we're purchasing product today is May 17th, and we'll say we've got some products in the system still from the past few weeks or maybe even the past couple of months, but the supplier is giving us some promotional pricing today, and we want that promotional pricing to apply to the stock that's being sold from today onwards until we use up that portion of stock from the system. We could set the stock apply date to today, and whichever costs are associated from this purchase order and for this date will apply at that point rather than sticking to the FIFO method there. Okay, moving on, we can also show our invoice details. If we turn this flag on here, it's going to generate this section up at the top here, which we do not have time to get too deep into today. These are mainly meant to be used after the order is received and when we're posting the invoice into the system. But yeah, for now we will focus on finishing this purchase order. Our next step, after we've got the store selected and maybe set a stock apply date, I will just, I'll leave that in there. It's not a huge deal. We don't have any stock in this database yet anyway. So our next step then is going to be to actually obviously add products to the purchase order. And we can do that with this add new item button at the top of the window. Now from here, we will have sort of a modified product list to work with. It's modified in that it is only showing products for the supplier that we are ordering from. So this is where that supplier link comes into play. Because we have the stocked beverages from this product list linked to this particular supplier, even if we go to base product group and turn on sub products, because we are only looking at products that have a link to our supplier here, A+ Beverages, we're only seeing the 66 products that we have that supplier link created for. But yeah, from there we can search through the list using the product search option. We can manually scroll through the list, so on and so forth. But this is going to narrow it down for us right off the bat either way. So what I'll do here is I will just add some products, and let's just go with, I'll actually just select draft beer here. We'll select a few. If we hold control, whoops. If we hold control, we can select multiple. If we do shift and control, we can add multiple there. I don't want to select that product though. Cool. And go select product there. For each product that we select, then we will have a small little window here where we can actually see some details about the product. And what I'll do, because we have added a supplier code and some minimum, maximum quantities and so forth for a different product, is I'll just quickly add some units here for these kegs. And I'll also point this out that we can add the unit cost. Now, because this is the first time we are purchasing these products into the system, there are no costs here yet. If we had purchased this product previously, the most recent unit cost is going to be shown here. We can edit that if we need to. So maybe the last time we purchased a keg of our Han Super Dry here, it was, I don't know, I'll say $100, but maybe the suppliers increased their cost and now it's going to be $110. We would be able to edit that from here. We can also edit those, the unit cost when we are receiving products, but we'll see that in a little bit. For now, I'll just kind of expedite the process here. So when I click OK, because I had selected multiple products there, we will be taken straight to the next one. Okay, let's go ahead and go to our packaged beer, and I'll just select a couple here. Alright, there we go. So we have our BPOS lager bottle, which we had set up a supplier code for earlier, so we can see that here. We can also see some other important information here, the product name, the base size and quantity size and so forth. We can actually edit the product from here if we need to. I'll just cancel out of that. And for the receiving store, which in this case is, if you remember, is our bulk beverage storage location, we will be able to see those store pricing settings, setting tab stock and quantities that we've set. So if there were any that were on hand, we would be able to see them here. Of course, we don't have any. Same goes for the cost on hand. If we had any on hand and we had any cost in the database, we would be able to see that here. If there were any that were on order, so maybe we're placing a purchase order today, but maybe someone already placed a purchase order for this product yesterday, the day before, and we're just waiting on that on the next delivery, we'll be able to see that, so that can hopefully prevent us from doubling up on any orders in that way. We can also see our minimum, maximum. This should actually be our restock quantity here. It should not be labeled as required quantity. This one here, though, is the required quantity, and that is going to be based on the quantity on hand and the minimum and maximum quantities that are set. But yeah, we can use those for reference there. Like I said, if we are using one of the automated purchase order options, the system will be able to generate the quantity of cases or units to order for us. But in this case, where we are doing this manually, we can still reference these numbers here. So we can go ahead and either order this, in this example, we can order this by the case, or we can order this by the bottle. Now, for this particular product, because the restock quantity is set to 24, I believe it is. Again, we can check the, oh, it's not, it's actually set to 1. So we might actually set this to 24 there. There we go. Cool, now that's not going to update here straight away, but we know that that's set to 24. So in that case, we would probably only order by cases. We wouldn't order by the each or by the units here, because we know that we need to order this in full cases from the supplier. So we might just go ahead and order 3 cases or something like that. Again, we can add a cost, and we can do that either per bottle here, which we might just do 1 just to keep things simple here and streamlined for us here. And then we'll just go ahead and select OK there, and we'll add a couple of cases for our other products here as well. Cool, so now we've got a few products added to our purchase order. One final thing that I'll point out while we're here is that the view that we're looking at right now is a standard default one that is called basic order. We can see this has some very useful data in it that we can see here, which summarizes and verifies our current order. We can see supplier codes if we've got them set, the product names or descriptions of them, and the number of cases and units that we're ordering, and the costs that are associated with those also. Now, I should point out that at any point prior to posting the purchase order, we can edit and delete products that have been added. So if maybe we decide, no, we don't actually need 2 of these, we can actually reopen that and we can change the quantity if we need to. We can also save this if we're not ready to post it yet by exiting, and then from these options here, choosing to save and exit. But you can see we have a couple other options there also, but we'll go save and exit. Now if we go back to our purchase order list, we can see that that is saved there. It's going to have a status, in this case, of PO creating. So that's been started, it's been saved, it is in the process of being created. From there, we can open it back up when we are ready. We can make any needed adjustments if we need to change some units that we're ordering and so forth, and maybe remove products from it altogether. And then when we are ready to post it, we have the option at the top for post purchase order. Now we are then going to have an option to print this purchase order. Maybe yes, maybe no, depends on how we are going to then communicate this purchase order to the supplier. We might go with yes. And we could then have a PDF of the purchase order, which we might save and email to the supplier, or maybe we fax it over to them, or maybe they have an online portal or something like that that we would need to send this through. Maybe we've got a third-party interface or integration set up that we could send these through. As I mentioned in, I believe it was the last lesson, we do have a supplier communications component that we could set up to electronically send a purchase order to a supplier after it's been generated, but in our case we don't have that set up, obviously. If we did, we would have the ability, or we would have another prompt pop up after we have posted the purchase order asking if we would like to send it electronically. Obviously we don't have that set up, so in our case we'll say that we are printing this to PDF, we're going to save this, and then we're going to manually maybe email it to the supplier, so that way on the next delivery date, which may be tomorrow or maybe the next day after that, we should receive these products in these quantities, and probably not for these costs because I've created these myself, but whichever cost they are going to sell them to us, they will be updated on their invoice, and we can then update those in our system here. Now in the real world, after the purchase order has been sent, however it's been communicated to the supplier, we would simply wait for delivery. But for our purposes, let's pretend that it maybe has been a day or two and we've just received our order. So the next thing that we need to do is going to be to find the purchase order in the list, because maybe we've created and sent a few others here. By the way, we can see the PO status now is going to be PO posted and sent. And we can go ahead and open that, and we can start our receiving process. Now, in a perfect world, we would have received all of our ordered products and in the correct quantities, and we could just click receive all items here. But chances are, especially if the purchase order contains dozens of items, or maybe more than dozens, maybe we just have one large supplier that we ordered hundreds of products from at once, there's a possibility that something may be missing or on back order, or that a quantity is off here or there. Maybe 3 were ordered but only 2 of something were delivered, and we need to update the receipt for the order with what was actually delivered. So if I open a product here, we will be able to enter the units that were received into this field here. So maybe we ordered 2, but only received 1. Another possibility is that costs could have changed and they need to be updated so that the cost in the system match with what was actually with what is actually going to be paid to the supplier. So again, we didn't have any cost entered in this system yet because we hadn't received or purchased any products in this database yet. So I made up these costs, but maybe we've now received our invoice from the supplier and the unit cost for a keg of Han Superdry here is actually 120. So we can update the unit cost here. We can see the percentage variance there, how much that has gone up for us. And we may need to manually do that for each product, but for these I will just go through and hit received in full for all of these. So after we've checked that all the quantities and costs are accurate to what was delivered, we can post the receipt. Again, with the invoice details here, there might be some things that we need to set as far as finance charges and freight charges and so forth. We might need to add a comment in here. We might need to add an invoice number. This is also a supplier flag that we can turn on if the supplier requires an invoice number to be entered. So I'll just enter it in here. We can also, there is also a supplier flag that can generate invoice totals here for us automatically, or we can manually enter them. I will not bother with any of that today, just to sort of streamline the lesson here for us. But once we have double checked all of our quantities and cost and input any other invoice details that we would like to, we can then go ahead and post the receipt. Well, and in this case, because I have selected a stock apply date, I'm being notified of that and asking if I would like to make this stock current now. I'll go ahead and click yes. And now, one thing I'll point out is that the PO status is going to be received partial because we did only, there was a product on here that we had only received part of, and I neglected to cancel the back order there, so I'll go ahead and save that. And I will post that receipt has now been received in full because I've canceled that back order. So now all of the quantities and cost for those products that we just purchased and brought into the system are going to be updated. If we go to our product list and maybe we just open our BPOS lager bottles, we are on the bulk beverage storage location here, which we just completed that purchase order for, and we can see that we now have 72 units on hand. But yeah, relatively simple, straightforward workflow there for creating a blank purchase order, a manual purchase order. Now again, the principles that we've just seen here for a blank purchase order also apply to the other purchasing options, the other purchase order options, as well as for manual receipts. There are, of course, a range of differences and slightly varying workflows for each. But again, this is just a 101 lesson, and we've still got stock takes to get through, and I believe we're probably around the hour mark at this point for this lesson, so we will move on. If you are interested in learning more about the other purchasing options that we've got, including the automated purchase orders and manual receipts, we do have plenty of documentation available for you. But for now, speaking of stock takes, so yeah, in the last lesson we went through the general concepts and reasons behind stock takes, but now we'll look at the workflow for conducting them in BPOS. We'll try to keep this as short as possible, but before we do get into back office to look at conducting a stock take there, it is important to know that stock takes can also be done via SmartPOS. Additionally, the act of physically counting stock can be done with a handheld PDE, and then we can import those counts into the system. For today though, keeping things simple, let's just head into back office and we'll run through a stock take process from there. So firstly, we will need to head back to the stock control menu where we've got the stock take option here. Now there is going to be quite a bit of information that will appear in this box at the top of the screen, and the information that shows in this section will dynamically change depending on what stage of the stock take process we're in. So yeah, I'll just keep this simple. I'll just read what we've got here. Welcome to the stock take module. Stock takes can be done on a per store basis. That is important to note, but also just to reiterate for probably what seems like the 100th or 1000th time is that stock belongs to stores, not to venues, which is why stock takes can be done on a per store basis. So one or more or all stores can be stock taken at the same time. Stock takes must be either started in the month they are to be reported in, or before any sales are entered for the next month. Depending on the venue or the stores, maybe stock takes are conducted every week, so we could substitute the word week in there for month, whatever the case may be. Now, when a stock take is started, a copy of all quantity and costs on hand are made. Additionally, during the whole process of the stock take, sales can be entered at the tills as per normal. All sales data is updated for reporting as per normal, however, stock and costs will not be updated until after the stock take process is complete. The physical stock is then counted, and these counts entered into the system. Reports on the stock take variance can be run, and any modifications to the counts can be entered. When all stock take counts are satisfactory, the stock take can be applied. This will transfer all counts into the actual on-hand figures. All stock take variances will be applied to the shift selected below. Once all stores that are being stock taken have been updated, any sales entered during the stock take will have the stock and cost information processed. Further reporting is then available on completed stock takes in the stock take reports area of stock reports. So lots of useful information in there, a bit to unpack, but a lot of it is very well explained. Some key points that I'll sort of reiterate from there is that as this one line mentioned here, that stock takes should be either started in the month that they're to be reported in or before any sales are entered for the next month. Stock takes are generally going to be conducted either late in the day or early in the day, depending on how you look at it, prior to the roll time of day. Also, there could be some pros and cons to stock taking per store. If we would like to count multiple stores and maybe just one store, depending on the stock take, maybe every month we count all of the stores in the venue, but maybe certain weeks or maybe every opposite week we count only certain stores. And the last thing that I will reiterate from this section up here is that, quantity on hand will be updated after the stock take is posted. So as I mentioned in the past, the quantities that are going to be in the system are going to be theoretical quantities up until the point that we do conduct a stock take and apply the stock take. Now, once we do apply the stock take, whatever quantities we have entered into the system are going to become the new quantity on hand numbers in the system. So those theoretical numbers that were in the system previously are going to be overridden at that point with whichever numbers we are updating based on the stock take. Those will then be the new starting quantities from that point. So then let's say if we think back to the Coca-Cola example, let's say we've conducted a stock take. The previous theoretical quantity was 100 cans. Now we've counted 25. We enter that into the system. We apply the stock take. The system is now going to show 25. When we purchase more cans tomorrow and sell more cans tomorrow, the system is going to update the quantity on hand number starting with that 95 quantity. All right, let's go ahead and start a stock take here. And we are going to have a little notification here just because I have not run the tills in my system here for quite a while. The system is thinking that there may be an offline till and some sales that haven't been received. That is not the case. I'll just go ahead and click continue. We can see that the information up here has now changed. It says you are about to start a new stock take. By default, all stores will be included in the stock take. Yes, that is correct. We can see that here. You can optionally uncheck any stores below to remove it from this stock take. Yes, we can. You can add any excluded stores to the stock take later. However, the stock take quantities to be entered are from when the stock take was first created. All stores to be counted at the same time. So very good, useful information there again. We can enter a description for the stock take. So we are just past the middle of May. So maybe this is going to be our mid-month stock take for May 2022. Aside from deciding which stores we are going to count, one of the first things to consider when we're beginning a stock take is deciding whether to conduct a full or partial stock take. Now, in a full stock take, which is going to be by default, we would need to select partial stock take here to conduct a partial stock take, but in a full stock take, any product that does not have its quantity entered manually will have its quantity on hand set to 0 when the stock take is applied. So very important to consider there. Again, I'll reiterate, in a full stock take, any product that does not have a quantity on hand entered will have its quantity on hand set to 0 when the stock take is applied. Whereas for a partial stock take, only products that have quantities entered manually will be updated. All other items, whether they've had, if they have not had quantities entered, all other items will remain with their theoretical quantity on hand after the stock take. So reason being, maybe we're conducting a partial stock take just for some hot items or some high volume items, and since we aren't counting the other products, we don't want to override their quantity on hand by setting them to 0. We just want to leave the theoretical quantities that are there until the next time that we do conduct a full stock take. But if we're doing a full stock take and there's a product that we do not enter a quantity for, the system is going to assume that its quantity is 0, that we have not counted anything for it. So as I read up here, at the time of starting the stock take, we can choose to stock take all the stores or just selected stores. Any store that's selected when starting the stock take can be deleted if we would like to without affecting the counts in other stores. So even if we do select to count all these stores now and then we change our mind once we start the stock take, we can do that. And I should reiterate also that when a stock take in back office has been started, tills can still be used. However, the processing of sales from the tills will be suspended during the stock take. Now, once the stock take has been applied, any unprocessed sales will then be processed and the stock levels will be updated based on the sales, and obviously taking into consideration the quantities that we have updated the system with via applying the stock take. Additionally, any stock movements, so any receipts that may have occurred during the stock taking process, any stock transfers, other stock functions, etc., which we'll get into in the next lesson, are allowed while we're in a stock take. However, there are some different workflows and options for each, and some have the option to apply either before or after the stock take was started. But what we'll go ahead and do now is I will have this on, we'll just do a partial stock take here, and cool, we get a little prompt there explaining exactly what I had explained earlier. So we'll just go ahead and click yes there, and I will just leave this on for all stores. We'll go ahead and start our stock take. Now we can see that this information has changed again. I believe this is actually the same bit of information that we read at the start has just reappeared for us there. But a couple different ways that we can go from here. We can actually, we could go straight to entering our counts, which won't actually force us to enter the count straight away. We can see if we hover over that, it's going to display the stock take entry screen. So if we do that, it's going to say stock take entry, but what we can actually do from here is print our count sheets. Now, I won't do that just yet. I will just close that. So since we have exited that stock take window, if we come to the stock control menu here, we can see that we're in a stock take, and if we look at the stock take component, we are going to see that it also here says in stock take. So can't really miss that. If we are in a stock take, we will know about it. If we come back to the stock take window here, it's going to say stock take in progress. But anyway, we'll exit that. So two different ways we can get to the stock entry window there. One is from that stock take module. The other is going to be if we come to our stock reports and we go to stock take reports and we select this one, which was started, and it's going to be selected by default. It's the most recent one. We can then set the view here to either count sheet quantity or count sheet, and we can then print those. Now, a couple different things that I will point out here. First thing is the difference between the count sheet. Actually, first thing before I get to that is that depending on the stores that we're counting, we can select either all stores or we can select the individual store here. So maybe we'll go with just the bulk beverage storage store. If we want to print out separate count sheets per store, it's probably a good idea. In addition, we may want to separate this by product group here. So what we could do is turn on subproducts and inactive. We'll be able to see all of the subproducts per group, and then we might actually narrow this down per single product group. So for example, chances are the stocked beverages in this example here are going to be located at different spots within the store, within our bulk beverage warehouse in this case, that the packaged beer and cider are probably going to be kept in a separate spot than where the spirits are located. So we might want to print out separate count sheets for those, or maybe even if they are right near each other, it's just going to be easier to count if we have these split out, especially if we imagine that we have, probably more than 5 items in this product group. But either way, that is an option that we can set for us there. The other thing is the difference between the count sheet quantity and the count sheet is that the count sheet quantity is going to show us our theoretical quantities here. So I know that this column is labeled start quantity, but those are actually our theoretical quantities on hand at the start of the stock take. So that's why that's called stock quantity or start quantity there. If we would like to, we can come in and edit this view, and we could add some override text there. Maybe something like that. But maybe we want to print the count sheets out without the theoretical quantities on hand there. And if we would like to, we can opt for the count sheet, not the count sheet quantity, in which case we do not have that quantity there. Cool. So what we can do then is we can print this report, and we'd be able to print this count sheet. We can hand that off to whoever is going to be counting this product, or if we're going to be counting it ourselves. Cool, we've got that printed for us. We can take that into the beverage warehouse here, and we can count our product. What we could do then is we can go back to our in stock take module here, and we can go enter counts. It's going to open the stock take entry window for us here. I know this looks just like the stock take report, but this is where we actually need to go to enter these counts. And if we then go to our packaged beer, the product group that we had just printed that count sheet for, we can then enter our counted quantities in here. So in this case, again, we can reference the theoretical quantities on hand. Now, obviously, we've just conducted a purchase order and received that stock into the database here. So these are going to be exact cases that we've just received. But we'll pretend that it's not. Maybe we've been open for a month or so, and now we're conducting our first stock take. But regardless, the system is saying that theoretically we should have 72 units of this BPOS lager bottles on hand, but we've actually only counted 70. And then maybe for the Bogues Light, we have actually counted 52. So we've got a negative variance on one, a positive variance on the other. As we enter these in, first of all, they'll be marked that they've been entered. Second of all, we can see the quantity difference here. We can see the theoretical quantities, of course, as I've mentioned. We can see the cost X of what we've entered here for the counted quantities. We can see the cost X difference, so the cost of the variances here. We can also see the cost of the theoretical quantities, and we can see the percentage variances, whether positive or negative here. So if we go back to our stock take module, we will be able to see all of the a little summary for each store here, how many products were entered. In this case, I have only entered the 2 of 118. What we might do then is I'll close this stock take entry and this stock take report. Actually, I'll just close all of these windows here. If we come back to our stock take module, we might then go to stock take entry for the next store, print the count sheets for this store, enter those counts, so on and so forth. Repeat that process for all of the stores and potentially different product groups or different locations where we've got stock stored within each store, so on and so forth until each of the stores are counted. So we do also have the option here, as I mentioned earlier, to delete a stock take once it's been started. And we can see some information up here. You have selected to delete this stock take. Any stores that have already been applied will not be affected by this action. Uncheck any store below to remove it from this deletion. You can optionally delete the whole stock take or just the entered counts. click exit to abort any deletion. So we've got the options here to delete entered counts only. So maybe we've entered maybe half of the products in the venue here, and for whatever reason we have to throw all that in the bin. We can just delete the counts that are entered rather than go through and manually delete them from the stock take entry, or we could just delete the whole stock take. But as this says, if maybe there are just some stores that we've decided not to count and we want to delete them from the stock take, we would leave those checked on. So maybe we are still going to count the bulk beverage storage store and the main restaurant. We can uncheck those, and we can go ahead and select delete whole stock take there. And in that case, we have, you can see there, unselected those stores for this particular stock take. We are just going to be counting and applying the stock take for these two stores. Now, one thing I should point out is, yes, we can also see the cost X start and cost X end here, as well as the difference and a variance percentage or a percentage variance. Now, the variance that's shown here is a quantity difference, not a cost variance. So the variance that we saw on the stock take entry screen, if I exit this and we go to our packaged beer and we go back to our entry, and we can see, oh, we are in the wrong store. So this variance here is actually our cost variance, whereas the variance that we see in the stock take module here is a quantity variance. So what I might do is I will pause the video here. I am going to enter quantities for all of the products that we're counting in this database, even though it is, or maybe not all of them. What I'll do is, since it is a partial stock take, I will enter counts for just some products, and I will, so yeah, I'll pause the video here and I'll be back in just a second. Alright, so I have entered counts for a bunch of products here in both the main restaurant and the bulk beverage stores location. Now, if we've entered some products and maybe we have gone back to count some additional products, and then we come back into the count sheet to enter again, we can go to our we can turn on the unentered only flag here so that the list isn't cluttered up with a mix of products that have been counted and some that haven't. It's going to filter the list to only products that have not been counted. Now, aside from that, let's say if I go to the main restaurant, we'll say that we've counted majority of the products here, but maybe there's some where, and obviously this is a terrible example because all these variances are going to be 100 because we did not have any products in this database yet because we did not have any quantities for these products in this database yet. But let's say that we did, and now we've got some variances that look like they're a bit far off. And maybe we've gone to then verify the counts. Maybe for our BPOS lager bottles here, the theoretical quantity was not -16, maybe it was 50, and we've now gone and counted 24. We come and enter that into the system. We can see the variance here, the quantity variance and the variance percent. And now we've gone to then double check. Maybe there's some BPOS lager bottles that were hidden behind another product, or maybe some products got mixed up while counting and something was counted as something else, or whatever the case may be. But we've now gone and recounted some products. We can, of course, prior to applying the stock take, come back into the stock take entry and we can update our counted quantities. Now, once we are all finished, if we come back to the stock take module here, again, we can see what's been entered and we can see the variances. Now, these aren't going to be accurate. Again, this is a demo database where we haven't had quantities entered for these products before because we haven't conducted any purchases for these products yet. What I'll probably do after this lesson is create some phony purchase orders in the system to bring these products in so that we have some data and cost and so forth to work with. But for now, we will just continue with this. Now, again, since this is a partial stock take, when we apply the stock take here, any products that we have not entered counts for are going to retain their theoretical quantities. Only the products that we have entered counts for are going to have their quantities updated. So once we've verified that everything is correct, maybe we've checked on some recounts because the variances were off, and we're satisfied that everything is correct. We're then going to come back to this module and go update stock with counts. And we've got some information up here. You are about to apply this stock take. By default, all stores will be included in the stock take application. You can optionally uncheck any store below to remove it from this application, which we've done already. We've already removed a few of those. All stock take variances will be applied to the shift entered, to the shift shown below. Once all stores that are being stock taken have been applied, any sales entered during the stock take, obviously we haven't had any sales entered during our stock take here, but if this were in a live system and there were some sales that were being processed while we have been in the stock take, those will now be processed, and the stock and the cost information along with those sales will be processed through the system. Further reporting is then available on completed stock takes in the stock take reports area of stock reports. So we'll say that we're satisfied here, and we understand all of that, and we will apply this stock take. We'll be prompted if we would like to continue. And now I've only entered, less than 100 products here. So if we had been entering, or if we were applying a stock take for hundreds or potentially thousands of products, that may have taken a bit more time than how long that took us there. But in this case, it didn't take too long to apply those counts. But we are now finished. This is now reverted back to stock take not started. If we exit this, we can see that this no longer says in stock take or in stock take here. And if we come to our stock reports, we can now open our stock take report here, and we will be able to see our stock take that we had started, and we will be able to report on that, and we can see all of the information that's associated with those products that we've entered counts for, the theoretical starting quantities, the quantities that we entered as the end quantities here, and the differences there for quantity and cost difference and the variance there as well. And of course, if we would like to see that per store, we can select the store to filter that there, and we can go sub-products and inactive if we would like to see if we would like to see that data for individual products, or if we'd like to go to a specific product group, we can do that, and notice that we can see the totals at the top here for those also. Alright, well that is going to be a wrap on this lesson. I know that we looked at quite a bit in this Stock Control 101 lesson, and there's quite a bit that we did not get a chance to look at, but as always, I thank you for your time and attention, and I'll see you next time.